Gotcha. All right, so without further ado, let's hear it for Cameron Cairns.
Hello, thanks everyone for coming. So just really quickly about me, CTO at Pepper, we do nutrition analytics for restaurant menus. So a lot of our work right now is involving trying to find out the kind of nutrition data of both like large restaurants and smaller restaurants. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the examples. So yeah, I've been learning how to scrape websites. This is just kind of me trying to distill that in a 10-ish minute talk, we'll see. My background's not in data science. My background's in web development. That does help in some ways, but in other ways I'm very helpless in this new field. Definitely trying to get to grips with it. So here's some of the goals we have today: just definitions, legalities, fundamentals, tools, and then hopefully some time for questions at the end. So what is web scraping? So it's basically extracting the information from either a website, really just like an online resource. I want to be kind of vague about that because I think a lot of people think of web scraping as extracting data from HTML, but it's just as valid. And I think going on in the future, we're going to be extracting data from JSON responses instead, just because everything's moving to client-side rendered websites, which is, you're going to have like the skeleton of the JavaScript and then data getting hydrated on the page. So you'll be looking for those JSON responses. And we'll have an example of that later on. The other thing is web crawling, and that's really more just trying to find the resources to scrape. Often you'll start a web crawl with a seed. So like there might be like a URL that's a, we don't have link farms anymore, but you'll have like a web page that has other links to other websites that might be good resources. So you'll use that as a seed, and you probably will scrape that site as well to actually extract the initial URLs. And then you just kind of keep going from there. Web crawling is not necessarily, it's not really like deterministic when it's going to complete. You're going to want to do something like limit how deep your crawl goes. So you might have a crawler that will find the first website that has like finds the first link that has like food in the title of it. You might only want to do that 6 times because it spiders out pretty quickly, and it can take a really long time to resolve all of those requests. So that's kind of what the Googles of the world are doing. The legalities around this is very gray. I want to be really explicit about that. I'm not a lawyer. I work at a legal company at one point, but anyway, not a lawyer, so just always check. The most recent legal decision was actually in, I think, October of last year. So this is still very fresh and changing a lot. So not too long ago, web scraping was pretty bad. It was pretty hard to justify it. In NoSol 2 versus United States, basically some employers started a competing business while also working at the employer, and they got sued because they're using their login to basically extract all the data that company had. Then they use it to seed their new competing business. It's a great test case for people that don't want people to scrape because it's pretty hard to defend someone doing that sort of thing. So the court ruled against them. So it was against scraping. Facebook Inc. versus Power Ventures. I guess Power Ventures had like a dashboard where you could manage all your social media platforms. And because it was behind a login, once again, even though you maybe authorized Power Ventures to manage your social media profile, the courts ruled against Power Ventures from scraping Facebook because it was like private data. So there's that. So, but we've got this new one that just came out in October, HiQ versus LinkedIn. So in this one, the Ninth Circuit Court ruled that if it's publicly accessible and not otherwise like copyrightable, it seems fair game. This is kind of why LinkedIn started putting up a paywall, so not paywall, a login wall recently, because of this ruling. So I would say right now, like if there's a login, maybe don't do it. But if there's no login, it's maybe fair game. Once again, do your own research. It's very complicated. I'll post the slides on the meetup page afterward. these are all links to the decisions, so you can read those and educate yourself about that. And yeah, copyright still applies. You don't get away from copyright just because you're scraping their site. So for us specifically, recipes are not copyrightable, which is interesting. The descriptions around how, like the recipe, like, oh, this was my grandmother's favorite recipe, that's copyrightable, but the actual like contents of the recipe is not. So like generally like facts are not copyrightable. There's a pretty good article from Scraping Hub here I've linked, so please read that. I'm not gonna tell you what really is good or bad, because once again, it's super sticky, I think, so. Okay, so now you know the whole legal things to be careful about. Marcus, do you mind holding this microphone? I'm gonna do some live coding. How much time do I have? Like 10 minutes?
Yeah. Oh, we have a lapel mic available as well.
That's right.
Sure.
Okay, so I could just yell, maybe. Can everyone hear me if I just yell? No? Okay. So so the first step in scraping a website is going to be to actually look at the website and try to see where the data you want to scrape is located. So I'm going to do some kind of live inspecting here. My browser of choice is Firefox, but others like Chrome or Brave or whatever else is out there right now. So here's A&W Food. I want to scrape their nutrition information. So I'm going to go to their burgers section. And we got these great, look at these great burgers.
So juicy.
Right. Not being paid by A&W. Oops. Okay, so.
Makes me want to drink root beer.
Okay, so the first thing is I'm going to open up the inspector. So just right click. Chrome's got developer tools, I think is what it's called. And what you'll notice here is they do have the nutrition information on the website. Now what I like to do to kind of find out where the things are in the HTML soup here is just kind of search the HTML for specific things. So like I see 550 calories and I've got it here, right? Perfect, 550. So this is sort of what you're gonna be doing as a web scraper. You're gonna be going to, especially if you have like specific content you're looking for, you're gonna go to that website and you're gonna see, all right, what's the general pattern? So see 550 is there, 442 is here. That's an even more specific number, even better. Okay, so I've got this class called nutrition fact. It's got a span next to it called calories. So those are the sort of things you want to be looking for. So the next thing. So how do you select it programmatically, right? So we've got CSS selectors and we've got XPath selectors. So CSS selectors will be more familiar for those who've used jQuery before. It's a little bit simpler. It's not as flexible, I would say, as the next one I'm about to show you. The biggest caveat, well, two caveats, was that you can't select the parent of an element once you have that element, and you cannot select by the content of the element. So let's say, for my example, there might be a section of the page called nutrition facts. That's pretty important for me, right? So with CSS selectors, I can't look for the actual text nutrition facts. Hopefully the JavaScript developer has put a little class on there called nutrition-facts or something, and that's how you can get it. But that's not always the case, unfortunately. And that is where arguably the better selector is. So XPath, I believe has to do with XML. Yes, it's an XML selector, but it works with HTML, so it's good. So yeah, you can use actual content. So I could look for find a H2 element with the text nutrition facts. Totally able to do that. It has pretty sophisticated relational selection. You can select the parent, the next sibling, the previous sibling. CSS selectors do have some of that, but it's not as sophisticated. So I put little links on. Yeah, thanks. I put little links about where you can learn more about each of the selectors. Thank you, Mahmoud. Right, and here's some examples of what it would look like. Right, so if I want to do a CSS selector, let's see here.
Can you increase the font, Cameron?
Oh, it's not big enough. I can see really well on my computer here, but obviously not enough. Is that a little bit better? I can do one more. Yeah. So I also use this low, solarized. Anyways, okay, so Yeah, I guess this is actually going through quite a few at a time. So just like kind of give you an idea. So like I'm looking for like a div element whose class is nutrition facts list. So what I'm trying to do right now is select the fat off of this burger, right? So I got total fat here. So with CSS it's a little bit more awkward. I have to be like, okay, I know that the fat is the second div element in this selection. So that's what I'm saying. It's a little bit more. It's simpler to look at, but it's more awkward when it actually comes to using it. You have to do a lot more like it's very specific, more fragile, like scraping. With XPath here, you can just look for the text total fat, and then know that its sibling is right there. It'll be just generally less fragile when it comes to building scrapers. You're not going to update it as often because let's say they decide to nest that nutrition element just one more layer down. Suddenly all of your CSS selectors are broken. Not great. But with XPath here, it's a very general selector. I'm just looking for any span on the page, any descendant of the root node whose text has total fat. That's probably not going to change as frequently as say like the specific index of that of where fat is located on the page. And then you can do some fancy stuff. I wasn't gonna do this all live, but I'm running out of time, I think. So I think it's a little bit more Pythonic in that like now I can say what keys am I looking for? Well, I've got calories, total fat, carbs, and that's all on the page. And I can do this nice little like comprehension here with a nice f string. Rather than I guess doing like a little bit more awkward, I think I had to like increment nth child here of 2 to be 1 to 4. I think is the actual like positions in the list. So I would TLDL is learn XPath. I think it's actually worth the kind of a little bit of a steeper learning curve. You can get a lot more precise selections that way, and it'll just make your process much better. How much time do I have left? Cool. Well, this is still the most important thing. So let's look at McDonald's, which is a more modern website than ANW arguably. And so we've got a new part of the web tool open here. We've got the network tab. So funky thing about the network tab, you have to have it open for it to work. So you can't have just opened the site already and then inspect it to get the network tab. It has to be running while the page is loading to actually get the dump of what resources are being loaded. So it's very useful because now I can see all the resources this web page is using. And then you can sort by type here, and then I can look for, and really the key thing you're looking for, maybe I need to resort it. Key thing you're looking for here is JSON, which is not showing up. Interesting. Right there. Right, so you're looking for JSON. So this is the internal API endpoint that McDonald's has set up for their nutrition data. So this is that's the gold, right? That's what you want. So you basically just gotta it's pretty simple at that point. You just kind of copy it. Just actually the right one. Yeah, so get item details.html, perfect. And then you can just, kind of don't allow. I mean, you can pretty much just shove that straight into your request. And then now I've got access to McDonald's nutrition information. So sorry, response dot. Yeah, so now you've got it as a nice JSON file, and you can just read that like a dictionary in Python, and it's super simple. Cool. I'm just gonna breeze through the rest of this stuff. So yeah, if you can use an API, that's a little bit more polite. There's a robots.txt file. It's pretty much located at every root website. So you go mcdonalds.com/robots.txt, and it'll tell you what they do and don't allow. Most of them don't let you scrape login pages, for example. It's really polite to identify yourself as a user agent, so that if you're hammering someone's site, they can send you an email and be like, hey, please stop DOSing my site. And yeah, just be careful about site performance. Scraping Hub uses, I think, a delay of 12 seconds per request on a website. So if you want to be really cautious, I would use something like that. look it up and make your own decision. Just gonna cover some like, these are the things you can use to scrape. So some people use Request and Beautiful Soup, Selenium, Scrapey. I use Scrapey because I have a lot of more complicated use cases and it's useful. Yeah, so it's got really good documentation. It's a little more complicated. It's like very complicated. And it's kind of like Django. It uses a lot of like classes and stuff, which like I'm not a huge fan of pattern-wise, but overall, it's got pretty much everything you want. And it's got a lot of things to help you make sure you're not violating kind of the best practices of web scraping. So it already has built-in like caching, so that caching and like URL duplicate detection, so it won't hit the same URL multiple times if you accidentally grab it multiple times. Its caching is pretty sophisticated. I think it can actually like look at the response headers and determine that it's already downloaded it. I think it uses a head type of request to determine if that resource has already been loaded. So more sophisticated caching than most people would implement on their own. It's got XPath support, which I like. And I think Scrapey Shell is a really good way to get into Scrapey. That's the thing I was using earlier. You can just hit a single web page with it and inspect the response. Using Scrapey itself gets a lot more complicated. You have to define a class as like a spider, and it's a lot more overhead. But I think Scrapey Shell is a good way to get into Scrapey, kind of dip your toes. And if you like that, maybe go for the overall library when you're ready to build an actual like crawler. They've got a commercial option. We used our own cloud because we have like, I don't know, like a bunch of credit on Amazon for startups. So, and you're gonna do that, you're gonna want like Tmux because when you leave SSH is gonna kill your process. So you make sure you have something that's gonna keep it running. And I used Fabric. It was super good. I don't know if anyone's used Fabric, but it's able to deploy too many machines to do something. So yeah, that's it. I don't know if I have like a minute for questions. No? Okay. Is there any questions?
Sites to use Scrapey XPath, to use Scrapey XPath and Selenium for a more dynamic site. That was the Coca-Cola example.
So if by dynamic site you're talking about something with like someone using React, for example, or so for someone using like React, I would actually look at the network tab and I'd look to see what JSON's being fetched from the internal server. That's usually your better way, and then you're not just loading a bunch of extra resources that you don't care about and they don't want to serve you. But that being said, yes, you can use Selenium. It's a little bit slower. Scraping Hub provides something called Splash, which is free. You can run it yourself. And I have resources in the slideshow. But that will also do it's like Selenium Lite. It'll still do some rendering of it'll run JavaScript and render some of the resources. It just can't do things like clicking buttons as easily as Selenium would. But for scraping, I think that's really all you need is just getting that page to load with the JavaScript initially. So that would be my recommendation is maybe use Splash instead, look into that, or just look at the JSON from the from the network tab directly. And you can usually look at the request URI to see how to modify that. So I guess maybe that wasn't clear, but at the McDonald's example, they probably got some sort of like internal ID for their Coca-Cola. That internal ID will probably be on the element of the Coke div somewhere. So like maybe where it says Coca-Cola as the product, it'll probably have an ID for what that product is. And that's gonna be how you're gonna use that JSON endpoint. You're gonna start modifying that ID to be equal to the divs you scrape. So it is still useful to use Scrapey, even if you have a JSON endpoint, you're gonna wanna probably get the internal IDs a different way. So. Anything
Cool.
else? Good.
More questions? Anyone? Cool.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Yep.